the door closed. And I need you to hear what I am about to say next before you spend one more minute grieving it. That was not a loss, that was an eviction. There is a meaningful difference between those two things. And I think the way you have been holding this departure, the weight of it, the confusion of it, the particular ache of missing something that was simultaneously hurting you suggests that you have been filing it under loss when the cards today are very specifically telling me it belongs in an entirely different category. Not something that was taken from you, something that was removed from your environment in the precise way that a toxin gets removed, not gently, not gradually, not with a soft transition that makes the departure feel comfortable, but completely and in a way that leaves the air noticeably different afterward. I want to walk you through exactly what Spirit showed me today, because what arrived in this spread is not vague and it is not general. It is specific to a very particular kind of dynamic, the kind that looks like a relationship from the outside but operates at its energetic core as something considerably darker. And I think you have been carrying the grief of this without the full language for what you were actually living inside. And my intention in this reading is to give you that language clearly enough that something in you can finally completely exhale. The devil is out of your house, Virgo. Let that sentence settle. Let me describe what I felt the moment I opened this energy, because the initial impressions were immediate and they are important for understanding the full context of what the cards then confirmed. I felt constriction first, not a current constriction, something that is happening now, but the residue of it, the specific bodily memory of having been constricted for a sustained period of time, the way someone walks differently for a while after a long illness, even after they have recovered. There was a quality in your field of someone who has been holding their breath for longer than they fully realized, and who is only now, in the aftermath of this departure, beginning to understand how long the holding had been happening. I also felt something underneath that constriction that I want to name carefully, because I think it is the most important thing I felt. I felt you, your actual self, not the managed, careful, slightly reduced version of you that tends to emerge when you have been in an environment where your full self was not entirely safe. Your actual self beginning to come back online in the space that the departure has created. Like a plant that was being grown in a corner where the light only reached partially, and has now been moved somewhere where it can receive what it was always supposed to have. That movement from constrained to genuinely spacious is the real story of this reading. The departure is only the mechanism. What matters is what becomes possible now that it has occurred. The card that anchors this entire reading appeared in the position I read as the nature of what you were living inside. And I want to describe its imagery specifically because every detail of it matters for understanding what you have actually been freed from. This card shows two figures chained at the neck, standing at the base of a throne on which sits a horned figure holding a torch surrounded by darkness. The chains around the necks of the two figures are large enough to be removed if the figures chose to lift them off, but the figures do not lift them. They stand in place, in the darkness, appearing to have forgotten, or perhaps never fully known, that the removal was possible. The figure on the throne is not primarily a card about external evil. It is a card about a very specific interior dynamic, the experience of being bound to something through a combination of genuine dependency, manufactured need, fear, the erosion of one's own sense of what is real, and the gradual dimming of the belief that life outside the constraint is actually available. This is the card of chains that feel necessary even as they diminish, of darkness that feels familiar enough to have become confusable with home. I am sensing this is a precise description of what you were living inside with this person or situation, not necessarily in any dramatic or obvious way. The most potent version of this dynamic often looks quite ordinary from the outside, but inside it, over time, something happens to your access to your own clarity, your ability to trust your own perception, your willingness to want what you actually want rather than negotiating your wants down to something that causes less friction. That erosion, subtle and accumulated across time, is the signature of this particular card in a relationship reading, and I am sensing it describes something you experienced with significant accuracy. I also want to address the torch in this card because it is significant and often overlooked. The figure on the throne carries fire, light, but it is inverted light, positioned below and used for control rather than illumination. I am sensing this person had a quality of brightness to them, perhaps genuine charisma, perhaps real intelligence, perhaps something compelling and attractive that made the situation feel full of potential, even as it was quietly removing pieces of you. The brightness was real, and the way it was being used was not in your direction. The second card in this reading appeared in the position representing the actual moment of liberation, the specific energetic event that the separation constitutes. And it is the card that most directly earns the title of this reading. This card shows a tower struck by lightning, a crown blown from its top, two figures falling from the windows, the whole structure compromised in an instant by something from outside that the tower could not contain or withstand. This is the card of sudden, irreversible structural change, of something that appeared solid, perhaps even permanent, being revealed in a single decisive moment as having been built on something that could not hold. I want to speak to this card in the context of your specific situation, because I think the most important thing it is telling you is not about what fell, but about what the falling revealed. Something was presenting itself as stable and reliable and built to last. And the departure, however it happened, however sudden or unexpected it may have felt, revealed that the structure was not actually what it was presenting as. The lightning does not create the instability. It simply makes it visible. What the Tower card shows is a foundation that was never genuinely solid being exposed as such dramatically in a way that removes all ambiguity. I am sensing that some part of you suspected this, that there were moments, perhaps many of them, where something in your knowing registered an inconsistency between what you were being shown and what you were actually experiencing. And that the work of managing that gap, of reconciling what you knew with what you were choosing to believe, has been exhausting in ways you have not fully allowed yourself to account for. That exhaustion is ending. The tower has fallen. The foundation that was never genuinely solid has been exposed. And the ground underneath it, your actual ground, the one that was always there beneath the structure that was built on top of it, is still present and still real and still yours to build on. Does this feel like it is describing something real, Virgo? The specific quality of something that looked solid from the outside, but that you, from the inside, had more mixed information about than you were always able to say clearly? Leave me a comment. I want to hear what this is bringing up for you. The third card arrived in the position representing what was actually being done to your energy within this dynamic. And it is the card that I think will resonate most deeply for those of you who have been struggling to find the language for why the departure was both painful and, underneath the pain, somehow relieving. This card shows a figure with 8 swords standing in the ground around them, blindfolded, their feet tentatively touching the ground, but their freedom of movement completely restricted by the arrangement of blades. This is the card of someone who has had their perception managed, whose ability to see clearly has been compromised, not through a single dramatic event, but through the accumulated effect of being in an environment where clarity was not in the other person's interest, where second-guessing yourself was inadvertently or deliberately cultivated, where the specific, precise Virgo mind, which is one of the most reliable instruments for truth-telling that exists, was being turned against itself through a steady, subtle undermining of its own conclusions. I am sensing this is a real and specific thing that happened to you inside this dynamic. Your knowing is exceptional. Your ability to read a situation, to track what is actually being communicated beneath what is being said, to notice the discrepancy between the version and the truth is one of your most defining qualities. And I believe that quality was experienced as a threat by the person who has now left, consciously or not, because accurate perception is incompatible with the kind of control this card describes. I also want to name something about the specific cost of this particular kind of energy drain, because I think naming it clearly is part of what enables it to stop. When someone's capacity for clear perception is persistently undermined, they do not simply lose clarity about the relationship, they begin to lose confidence in their perception in general. They begin to second guess themselves in areas that have nothing to do with the relationship. The erosion spreads, and then when the dynamic ends, the work of recovery includes not just the grief of the ending, but the much slower process of reinstating trust in your own knowing after an extended period of having that trust used against you. You are in that process now. And I want to tell you something about its timeline. It is shorter than you think because the erosion was never actually about your perception being unreliable. Your perception was always reliable. What happened was external pressure that temporarily obscured access to it. Remove the pressure and the perception returns. You are already experiencing this. The things you knew but talked yourself out of knowing are beginning to simply be known again, quietly and without drama, simply because the interference has been removed. Inhale with me, Virgo. The fourth card arrived in the position I read as what this separation is actually making possible for you, and I want to describe it with the care it deserves because this is the heart of what the reading is ultimately about. This card shows a figure emerging from a pool, rising upright, with a sword held aloft toward a clear sky, the water around them still and reflective, the dawn breaking in the background. This is the card of perfect, undistorted mental clarity arriving after a period of obscured or contaminated thinking. In traditional readings, this card belongs to the suit governing the mind, and its rising, emerging quality tells me something specific about what the departure is releasing in your cognitive and perceptual life. What this card is describing is the return of your own mind to you, undiluted, unmanaged, not navigating the specific terrain of what you were and were not allowed to know clearly, simply present, clear, and operating with the full precision that has always been its natural state when external interference is not actively working against it. I want to speak to what this specific return is going to feel like as it fully arrives, because I think naming it will help you recognize it when it happens rather than being surprised by it. There will be moments of sudden uh, unexpected clarity about things that had felt confused or murky or impossible to resolve for a long time. Not because new information arrives, but because the thinking you were already doing, without the interference, simply resolves itself cleanly. Decisions that seemed impossibly complicated will simplify. Patterns you were struggling to see clearly will become obvious, and your sense of your own direction, which I am sensing had become quite murky inside this dynamic, will begin to feel genuinely navigable again. That is your mind coming home. Let it. I also want to speak to something about the specific pacing of this return, because I want you to be patient with yourself during it, rather than adding a new layer of pressure on top of recovery. The clarity does not return all at once, and it does not return on a schedule. It tends to come in waves, specific and unexpected, often attached to moments of stillness rather than to active, deliberate effort at understanding. I am sensing you will have a moment, perhaps soon, perhaps in an ordinary quiet circumstance when you were not expecting anything in particular to happen, where something simply becomes clear that has been obscured for a long time. And in that moment, you will know, not as a conclusion you reasoned your way to, but as something that simply arrives and settles, that you are back. That the fogginess has cleared enough for the real ground to be visible again, and that ground, your actual ground, will feel more reliable than anything you are standing on inside what you have been freed from. I want to address something specifically, Virgo, about the recovery that follows a dynamic like this one, because I think it is important for you to understand what to expect and what to be patient with. Virgo will, in the aftermath of something like this, have a very strong impulse to understand it completely, to construct a full, coherent, exhaustively detailed account of what happened, why it happened, what the specific mechanisms were, where the precise turning points were, what should have been done differently, and when. Your mind will want to build a complete case file and review every piece of evidence until the whole thing makes total airtight sense. I want to gently counsel you about the limits of that impulse in this particular situation. Not because understanding is not valuable, you know it is, and it genuinely is, but because the kind of dynamic this card describes does not always yield to the kind of clean, logical analysis that your mind does best. The fogginess was the point, the confusion was manufactured, and trying to achieve total clarity about something that was specifically designed to prevent clarity can keep you in the energetic orbit of what you have been freed from far longer than is actually necessary or useful. The most important understanding for now is not the full, detailed retrospective account. It is the simpler, more fundamental recognition that the environment was affecting your perception in ways that had nothing to do with your actual reliability as a perceiver. The perception was fine, the environment was not. That understanding, held clearly and simply, is what enables the recovery to actually happen, rather than being endlessly delayed by the search for perfect analytical resolution. The fifth and final card in this reading arrived in the position of what is now genuinely available to you, what the cleared space is opening into, and it is a card I want to deliver with the full warmth it carries, because after everything that came before it, you deserve to receive it properly. This card shows a star shining over a kneeling figure who pours water from two vessels, one into a pool and one onto the earth, nourishing both the interior and the exterior simultaneously. The sky above is full of stars. The quality of the image is one of the most genuinely peaceful in the entire deck. the specific peace that is not the absence of anything, but the presence of something, the particular aliveness of someone who has found their way back to themselves and who is now simply in the right place. I am sensing this card is describing where you are heading. Not a vague positive future in general, but the specific experience of genuinely inhabiting your own life again, of having your energy available to pour into things that actually receive it and are nourished by it, of waking up in an environment that is not quietly working against you, that does not require the constant low-level vigilance of navigating something that is not what it presents itself to be. I also want to speak to the number of this card and where it sits in the sequence of the major arcane, because it comes after the tower, after the lightning, after the structure falls, and it represents the specific quality of hope that is only available on the other side of genuine reckoning. This is not the naive hope of someone who has not yet encountered difficulty. This is seasoned, tested, real hope, the kind that has survived the tower falling and that continues anyway, not despite having seen what structures built on false foundations look like when they collapse, but with that knowledge fully present and integrated. That is the hope I am sensing in your energy right now. Underneath the grief and the confusion and the adjustment, it is still there. It was not taken. And as the clarity continues to return, as your perception reinstates itself, as the cleared space fills with things that are actually nourishing rather than quietly consuming, that hope is going to have more and more to anchor itself to. As I bring this reading toward its close, I want to leave you with the complete and honest picture, the cards assembled today. What left was not simply a person or a relationship. What left was a specific energetic configuration that was operating in your life in ways that were obscuring your perception, constraining your access to your own clarity, and gradually, subtly asking you to be smaller and less certain and less fully yourself than you actually are. The departure is not a tragedy to recover from. It is a correction, an eviction, something that was not in alignment with your actual nature being removed from your environment by a mechanism larger than either of you. What remains is you, your perception returning, your clarity reinstating, your particular combination of precise mind and genuine warmth and the specific formidable goodness of who you are, intact beneath everything, simply waiting for the interference to stop so it can function as it was always meant to. The devil is out of your house, Virgo. And the house, your actual house, the one that is yours and that reflects your actual nature and your actual values and your actual capacity, is now yours to furnish as it was always supposed to be. If this reading named something you have been living with but struggling to find language for, please share it with a Virgo who might be sitting inside a similar confusion and needs to hear that what feels like loss might actually be liberation. And leave me a comment. I want to hear what resonated and what it helped you finally name. I read every single comment and I hold every story shared here with genuine care long after this video ends. Until next time, Virgo, the door closed and the air is already different on this side of it. Breathe it in. It is yours.